YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for the deluxe Mosa Razord Zord from Power Rangers Dino Fury, the Gold Ranger's primary mecha. As per usual, we're going to take a look at this thing and compare it to the Japanese version. Unfortunately, there are some main modes that are unavailable to us because the Dimetro Zord does not exist here in America, at least right now. There is also a final combo that combines with the Ptera Free Zord that will be shown off in the Ptera Free Zord review because mine is supposed to arrive the day after this is going up, so it's not available for that yet. But look forward to that, and they will be linked to each other, but we will be able to do all of the primary modes he includes. I'm going to get started and quickly show a comparison of the keys that it comes with, or the key it comes with, and the Japanese key, and also show the sounds that it makes in the Okay, for the key comparison, obviously it's almost unfair to compare because they went for really different approaches. They really just emphasize wanting to have a good, well-articulated mech for this. It can work with the items, but it's not the main goal, whereas this really wanted to combine the mecha with the gimmick. So like for this side, I mean, you can pull this off right here and it actually reveals a little night mode, but you basically have a very basic, almost looking like a cookie cutter pattern here, and this is kind of more a traditional key right here. And then on the other side, you know, you have the differences in the helmet, which we'll take a look at in the mecha mode, and then this can actually become this mode. This can't do it, but it's almost unfair to compare because they're going for different things, so I'm not going to fault this version for not being like this one, because I actually like that they prioritize the helmet articulation and look for this. As far as sounds, it doesn't market it with this, but obviously it can be used with it if you want. But as always, it doesn't do anything exciting. It does market it with this, which is weird. I mean, sort of, just because it doesn't really do individual sounds. Like, you put it in here. And it will just do the same thing as always, in which it just activates the sound depending on which way you're facing it. So yeah, it does advertise it on the box as if it's going to unlock a new sound, but it doesn't because this thing doesn't really have an individual reader. Also, you don't have to take this little piece off here for this mode. You can use it in here fine without it, but I just took it off because it didn't work so well with the regular morpher. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at this guy on his own first. We're going to start with these two little guys, these two little knuckle zords here, these knuckleheads that become the fists, as you can see, but they're also sort of their individual little almost mini zords that kind of remind me of the Ninja Storm things, and they're kind of adorable and fine for what they are. Just for a comparison to the Japanese version, honestly, they're very comparable. The only primary difference that I note between them is the fact that this one is a little bit bigger and they have the different mechanisms here. But other than that, there's not like a huge difference between them, and it's not exactly something you're going to be scrutinizing. Well, I mean, some people might. You never know. As far as the main event itself, I find it to overall be fine. I definitely have some slight issues with it, but this isn't my primary, most excited mode or anything like that, so I think it does a good job at looking decently accurate. We'll do a comparison here in a second, and I do think there are some pluses and minuses to both. But for this one, it's fine for what it is. I think my primary complaints come with the mechanism, when I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the Japanese version. But the Japanese version has the legs coming together a little bit easier, because down here you can see you put these legs together, and then they're held together via the fin, which is also going to become the sword, and it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to get them to finagle together just right, and it doesn't hold together as tight as the Japanese one. I think it comes together a little bit better, so that can be a little bit hard to deal with. Also, I believe it's this one of the fins on here is really loose. I think also the Japanese one, they're just not molded on there, but they're basically permanently on there unless you really pull it off, and one of them on here is really loose. And overall, I think it doesn't hide itself that well either. It's not like the worst at hiding it, but it's also not the best. I think it does like just exactly the right amount of hiding, like the mecha aspect of it. Like it kind of just lies down into it in a way. So it's not like my absolute favorite design in terms of the mecha toy, but I think it gets the job done for what it is. But let's go ahead and take a look at a comparison between it and the Japanese version, and then I can talk about some more of the differences there, and you can see the differences obviously. Okay, so here we have the two together. I think this is one of the ones where I actually do prefer the Japanese version for it. In a lot of cases, just look-wise, I've actually been preferring the Dino Fury ones, but in this particular case, I think this one does look a little bit better. Like, before you get into any details or colors or anything like that, this just looks a little bit better to me because it's overall a little bit bigger, especially like the head, and it makes it look a lot more accurate to the show in terms of the proportions of the actual creature, whereas this one's a little bit smaller. And you have a little bit of a higher quality plastic there with the shine there, but I think the details are mostly comparable, but like the bigger bigger head and the bigger proportions of it all definitely make it feel a little bit more natural. Same thing, sort of the chunkier arms here with the lack of the like lanky articulation arms. It makes it look a little bit more natural to that. With that being said, for a positive for the American version, like this right here is the little fin here, and it just is kind of stationary and sits there, whereas these kind of move back and forth, which is actually kind of nice. You can kind of position them in a more natural way, and I think it just gives you a little bit more freedom, and that's just kind of a nice detail. They also both have these little things that come up here, which is for like the SpinoThunder mode, excuse me, which is a mode you can't do here in the English one because it's like combining him with the Dimetro Zord into this weird Frankenstein creature. I kind of cut away to some footage of the past review for this previously on Dawson Rider Reviews, and like you can't do that here since it doesn't exist, but I believe that's primarily for that mode, but it's still included there. And there's obviously some general kind of quality differences, like I think that the plastic looks a little bit better on this. As I mentioned here, this looks a little bit more of a high quality. This is a lot more of a sturdy plastic here for the fins back here. I don't know if you can tell that well, but this is very sturdy, and these are very flimsy and kind of, you know, malleable, like they're kind of bowing in a little bit. It's not a huge deal, but it's definitely something you notice. You can see here that the gray plastic is different. This one's much more of a dark gray. This is a very, very light gray, almost white color. An interesting difference there. Also, if you didn't notice, this guy's missing a tail. That's because I could not find the tail for this guy. It does exist, obviously. I searched high and low and I could not find it. I apologize, but my review for this will be linked multiple times, so if you're that interested in it. But there's not like a huge, significant difference outside of what you already see here between the colors there, so I really apologize about that. Obviously, the main difference comes in the form of the mechanism. You know, you still have that right here, but these just kind of naturally cling together better, so it makes it a little bit easier to deal with this mechanism, which I like. I mean, trade-off is you get some nice articulation with this, but this is a little bit different. And just in terms of the sturdiness and the ease of this dynamic, I prefer this a little bit. Also, these here, as mentioned, you can see they're not like permanently molded because you can move this around, but they don't come off, or they're not supposed to come off, so I don't have any problems with this falling off like I do with this one here. Overall though, I mean, there are some significant differences in certain areas, but it's nothing too huge or deal-breaking for me personally. There's definitely things I notice, it just depends on what's important to you. But now let's go ahead and transform this guy, and then we'll be able to compare them in their mecha modes as well. The transformation for this is really simple. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide these out of the way before I forget. Take this piece off. Oh, and there's the piece falling off I told you about. Speaking of those, something really important you don't want to forget, probably the most complicated step. Flip these this way. You got the pen and paper? Okay, this way. It's going to be standing up, and the legs are a little bit separated now. We can kind of finagle that more later. Fold these down. Then snap these in. Then this right here, twist this way. And you can see the head is peeking out there. I left the key in just to show you that you can leave the key in there in animal mode, but you're going to have that peeking out. So maybe you want to take it out if you have it in the dinosaur mode, just so you don't have to worry about it, but I just wanted to show that. But then you open that up here and you get the head, and obviously it can come out because we saw that at the beginning. And then you can kind of do the cool proper, like, boom, there. It's a little hard to get out sometimes depending on how you have it positioned, but obviously it's possible. And lastly, put the weapon in here. And there we have the Mosa Razord Zord in the warrior mode. Obviously it's articulated so you can get it in a much more exciting pose than this. Just kind of leaving it like this for now to talk about it generally, and then to do the comparison next to Kishiryu Neptune so it doesn't feel bad that it can't move. But overall, I'm really happy with this guy. Honestly, it is missing a few details in some places and it's not perfect, but for the most part it basically continues what I like about the Dino Fury Zords from the original release, as I think it looks much more show accurate proportionately to the show, which just makes it look so much nicer, and it helps that this is one of my favorite designs, and I think overall it just looks nice. And honestly, these feel of a solid quality. I know that there's some talk of issues of like these breaking and stuff, which can happen, but from my personal experience, they feel overall solid, and they're not breakable in the sense that I've had toys where if you're not really careful, or if you're not really careful and you press this the wrong way and it's really sensitive, it'll break. It's more like if you apply too much force. I personally broke my Tiger Zord, but that was because I was like trying to do something and two pieces smashed together really hard because my hand slipped and that broke it. Just note it is possible, but for me, it overall feels solid, and the articulation is a really nice bonus. I will show that off here in just a second, but before we do that, I want to show the Japanese comparison. So here he is next to Kishiryu Neptune, and it's basically like looking at the comparisons for the main ones. And this certainly isn't bad. You know, it looks fine. It actually has a nicer high quality plastic and it makes it look a little bit better. It definitely wins in my opinion in the creature department. But for me, just in terms of the look, I prefer this one. I think it just looks so much more well-rounded and accurate. The proportions of it kind of being a little bit more slender fit in more with the show, especially since they do really dynamic fights in the show. And I think most importantly, It's the head sculpts which look better, because this one being more well-rounded makes it look so much more like the show. That's obviously a different challenge here because they really more so combined the gimmick of the keys with the mecha, so you're kind of stuck in that one position and you can't make it rounded like they did here, so that's obviously why that happened, but this just looks so much better to me. Like, there's definitely some differences in the quality a little bit, and some paint differences and some plastic differences, but I noticed that more so in the Animo mode. But if we're just talking about the overall look, I definitely prefer this. It is worth noting, though, as mentioned and as I showed before, there's modes you can't do because the Dimetro Zord does not exist, at least not yet. I'm going to cut away again to some footage of showing the other mode that combines this guy with T-Rex and the Dimetro Zord, which creates what I believe they call one of the Ultrazords in Dino Fury, and obviously you can't do that here, so that is a plus for the Japanese version, and it's something I guess to consider if you're trying to decide which one to collect, because even though I can recommend this one here for personal reasons that I prefer it, if you're wanting to get everybody, odds are we're not going to get all the main releases here, and that's definitely something to consider, and that limits some things. Now for some articulation, let me just go over it really quick. I'm just getting this out of the way because I don't want it falling off. So for the arms here, you have a nice all-around movement here. You can go 360. You have a nice elbow joint here. You have some swiveling at the elbow as well. You have a nice ball joint at the leg, and this little piece falls off just like I said. And then you do have a nice knee joint here. It can be rather tough. I don't know if that's just mine, but it is a little bit of a tough knee joint. So just be careful when you're pushing it back. That could be something where you're applying too much force. It is nice to have that articulation there, but it's a little bit of a stiff joint there. You do have a nice ball joint here at the foot. It's worth noting that the feet are separate when you get it and you have to pop them on. But it's a little bit difficult to get on, but I think that's a good thing because once they're on, for me, mine are a tight fit and I haven't had any problems with them coming off or being loose or anything like that. And the head also does have a little bit of articulation. You can move it up and down, and technically you could probably move 360, but you can't because it hinders it a little bit, but you are allowed to move it, so it gives it a little bit of personality, which is really nice. And I think that is one of the coolest features about this, is that they're fully articulated, or not fully, but they're more fully articulated than your standard mecha, which is just really cool. And as I mentioned before, I think it really is in favor of this particular line and these particular designs, because in the show they really do a lot of dynamic poses and dynamic fights, and that really represents it well, and I think that's a really cool touch that really benefits this particular series. And overall, honestly, I'm very happy with this. It's not perfect. You do have some little problems here and there with some of the mechanisms. I think the Japanese version of the dinosaur mode looks overall better, but overall I'm still happy with it. It continues with what I personally liked about the first Dino Fury Zords. So if you are interested in this Megazord, I can definitely recommend it, especially since it's at least half price for what you would usually pay for a Ryusoulger mech. I don't know what they're going on for the aftermarket, but in terms of retail before shipping, it's at least half price. Although, as I mentioned, it's worth considering the fact that we likely will not get all of the Zords here, so if you're a completionist, just know you probably won't get all the Zords here. I'm not saying for sure, just that's the way it's looking, but just in terms of this product by itself, I can recommend it. I like it. I think you're really getting a good Megazord for the price. But that's about it for this one, though, guys. Until next time, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell. So notifications for my videos. Awesome Rider, signing out.